Welcome to this series of lectures, CEC Gurukul lectures on history, and I am Shankar Kumar. I teach history at Hindu College, University of Delhi, and the topic that we shall be talking about today is the rise of the Absolutist States in Europe. Now, this is a vast topic to begin with. It encompasses a range of monarchies that emerged as powerful across the continent of Europe from around 16th century onwards, and Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, all regions displayed this tendency, this attribute in the monarchical system of the time, and as the name itself suggests, that the monarch went on to become more powerful with respect to particularly the mundane affairs of the state. Now, we in India need to understand the backdrop of this emergence, because the kind of history that we are acquainted with in our own country doesn't quite reflect the backdrop in which such monarchies in Europe emerged around 16th century, because they had a different kind of a background in which these states actually emerged as powerful. They had different segments to contend with as compared to Indian history. For example, all of us know that in the Middle Ages, it was the papacy, it was the church that was very powerful. It was all regulated from Rome, and the political rulers had to emerge out of the umbrella of papal control in order to assert themselves. So that is one angle that is important. The other angle is, of course, the aristocracy, because all of us know that Middle Ages was about feudal polities and so forth, and as we know that in feudal polities the central control of a monarch is not phenomenal, and therefore the monarch had to contend with several aristocrats, and aristocracy is a class, in order to assert the apparatus of the state, in order to pierce through their command and control across regions, and emerge as significantly powerful as compared to several other feudal entities that were there. So these are some of the you can say some of the aspects of the backdrop in which absolutist monarch or absolutist monarchies emerged in Europe. Now, as you can see on your slide, our discussion would revolve around these 4 or 5 points that I have mentioned on the slide. Of course, the meaning of the term, what we mean by absolutism, the historical backdrop of the 16th century Europe, and we shall elaborate on that. Variants, and when I say variants, you should think of, say, the monarchies that emerged in the western part of Europe, say in countries like Britain, France, and so forth. And you also had monarchies that emerged in the central and eastern part of Europe. For example, in what today is Germany or Russia, right? So these areas also had monarchies, and they were becoming powerful. The monarchs were becoming powerful, but their nature was different. So in order to distinguish the two kinds of monarchies, both were absolutist, all right, but their social base was different, their intent was different, their you can say the different classes For example, the feudal classes, the aristocrats, the clergy, the bourgeoisie, and professional groups, etc., traders, etc. So their social base kept varying depending on which part of European continent we are talking of. In general, it is said that Western European absolutist monarchies were somewhat more progressive, in the sense that their social base was somewhat tilted in favor of the new aristocracy, or you can say bourgeoisie. So they were exploring with new social groups in order to premise their polity, whereas in the eastern half of Europe, or even in central Europe, you find somewhat conservative aspect of the absolutist monarchs, and they continued to lend support to the old aristocracy, the landed aristocracy, and it couldn't quite come out of their influence or their dependence, you can say. Nevertheless, they did make inroads, and that is why they are referred to as absolutist monarchs. They did make inroads through taxation structure, through the optics of control over different feudal polities, but simultaneously they went on, you can say, deepening or strengthening the roots of serfdom. So they couldn't quite penetrate through or cut through the powers of the aristocracy or the nobility in eastern part. So that is what I mean when I just put this point, variants, right? And then, of course, the nature of the absolutist monarchies. Of course, once we discuss the features of absolutist monarchies, the backdrop, and so forth, the not so evident aspect of these absolutist monarchies, which by default predisposed it to acting in a particular way. So all those things would reveal, and that is what we mean by nature. So was it pro serfdom, or was it pro bourgeoisie? Was it progressive, and so forth? So all these things that are evident only through attributes of state apparatus, taxation structure, etc., they go on to reveal the nature, the not so obvious aspect of its being there, and that is what we mean by nature. So these are the things that I intend to talk to you about so far as talking about the rise of absolutist monarchies is concerned. Now, as I said in the beginning, that this is a vast topic, and this requires country-specific discussion. Emergence of absolutist monarchies in France, and we all know the iconic Louis XIV and his statement, "I am the state," and so forth. That cannot be generalized for entire Europe, and so its evolution of say absolutist monarchies in Britain would reveal a different kind of story, and its detailing would be different. Similarly, as I said, that for Germany, for Russia, it would be a little bit different, and the trajectory would be in favor of serfdom, or it will display more conservatism rather than the progressivism that is displayed by its Western counterpart. So all these things will require country-specific discussion, and that of course we will do in a subsequent interaction. But what I intend to do with you today certainly is the immediate historical backdrop of the emergence of absolutist monarchy in Europe. So these are some of the big points that we would be talking about. Some of the aspects of the broad canvas in the backdrop of which absolutist monarchies emerged around 16th, 17th century in Europe. Now, you can see on your slide, I have just mentioned that 16th century happens to be an age of dramatic change. All of us know, anyone who is aware of the European history would understand the enormity of change that was registered in 16th century Europe. You have several movements, right from say if you regard the beginning of the Renaissance, the cultural revival or cultural efflorescence that struck Europe to begin with from Italy in the second half of, say, 15th century, then it went on to spread to different parts of Europe all across 16th century. It was a new kind of an outlook with man at the center of inquiry, and it was a decisive kind of a break from the Middle Ages in terms of outlook, in terms of detailing of whatever sculpturing or paintings or architecture or sense of beauty, a sense of proportion, etc. That constitute what we understand by this term Renaissance. So that is one. I'm just talking of some of the important historical features of 16th century, and that is why we regard it as dramatic, because they actually act in a cumulative way. So far as historical changes are concerned, these historical changes one might theoretically in textbooks count them as 1 factor, 2 factor, 3 factors. But if you as I said, that if you use the large canvas, they constitute the ecology, they constitute the intellectual you can say surrounding in which such changes are getting registered. So that is one. And then 16th century also is known for what we know as a Reformation, the Protestantism movement and several other movements which was in opposition to the existing Catholicism, or the way Christendom worked, the way Christianity was viewed. So we all are aware of Martin Luther, Calvin and so forth, Zwingli, and they gave a different interpretation. They gave a different kind of outlook to Christianity as such. And that changed the human perspective, that changed the way people looked at things, and all these things had an impact on very tangible historical changes like emergence of a new kind of monarchical polity, and that is what we would be talking about. So as a consequence of this, and of course, since we have spoken of Renaissance, Reformation, let's not forget that 16th century is also the time when you can say early colonial adventures had begun. Early colonial empires were sought to be created by Portugal, by Spain, and there were voyagers who would go into the deep sea, establish colonies in far off land and start some trade intercourse with them. We all know of how Spanish economy was impacted, at least for a brief period of time, by the heavy inflow of silver bullion from the Americas, and the sheer absence of the market institutions and sophisticated financial institutions in Spain or in southern part of Europe. The advantage was actually leveraged by the northern counterpart in Antwerp and London, because that's where most of the financial institutions and banking houses had their offices. So whatever material advantages that accrued to Spain on account of its overseas colonies actually went on to transform the economy more than Spain, that of the northern Europe, say Holland or England, and so forth. So 16th century is about that story as well. It's about transformation from what we understand as feudalism to capitalism proper. And when we say capitalism, we must be mindful of the fact that here we are talking only of commercial capitalism, which is supposed to be the first stage of capitalism. So, of course, we know that it is only the last quarter of the 18th century that industrial revolution happened in a big way to begin with in England in some sectors, and then over the next 50 years or so it is spread to different parts of Europe. By the time we reach the middle of 19th century, almost the entire western half, western half of Europe was fairly industrialized, including the countries like France and Germany alongside Britain. But at this moment, around 16th century, it is only the commercial capitalism that we are talking of. So what do we mean here when we say commercial capitalism is that capital came to acquire value in terms of investments, which was not being carried out in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, the lifestyle, the outlook was ostentatious, and it was not geared for market production as such or market transaction as such. So people produced, but they produced mostly for ostentatious consumption at the local level only. And there is no large scale overseas long distance trade and commercial intercourse for which these productions were happening. Towns and cities were also very few, and so there was fair degree of what we understand as localized economies existing in the Middle Ages. And this was the time when the Roman Church was experiencing its heyday, and the political aspect of ruleship or the kings were there, but in several of the mundane affairs which otherwise should have belonged to political entities and political apparatus, that were also actually overseen by the church only. And that is why the church in its functioning had come to acquire a lot of malpractices, a lot of corruption also. And it is against these crept in corrupt practices of church that you have the movement like Reformation happening in 16th century. I just told you about the economic dynamism of 16th century also. Even in population terms, you'll find that 16th century Europe experienced some kind of a increase in population in most of the pockets, and in pre-modern times, increased population is one of the best indicators of economy doing well. So robustness of economy is revealed not by data as such, but by you can say increased number of people, the demography. So that becomes the index of economic development. And not to forget the role of the printing press. Now, printing press had come to influence the lives and times of Europeans like never before. It was a new entry into their history, and it helped in extending the circle of people who would feel involved in discussions related to say Reformation, Renaissance, or whatever. So it increased the network of communication of informed ideas, and that is why you find that its ripple effect, any idea could travel to different parts of Europe faster than it used to in the earlier times. and that is what works from behind so far as success of Reformation ideas are concerned. And even otherwise, I mean, the financial transactions, the financial rules, and there are several other things like scientific outlook, use of the Arabic numerals, which essentially are Indian numerals, right? That could facilitate very complex calculations which were very much required for complex transactions that were now happening in most of the European cities around this point of time. So trade and commerce was doing well, and so far as the kings are concerned, the kings are very eager to latch on to the profit generated through trade and commerce. So they wanted to get closer to these traders, these merchants, because that's where new money was emerging. That's where value is being created over and beyond the traditional farms, the agrarian farms, the peasantry. So earlier the sole source of state revenue would be the peasants, whereas now on account of vigorous trade and commerce, commercial taxes, trade taxes could also fill the state's coffers, and so the kings were very much eager to have best of the trading houses established in their empires and so forth. So it was a changed kind of scenario that we are talking of, and therefore you can see on your slide I have mentioned that traditional and established ways of thought were now giving way to new concepts of heaven and earth. And therefore, if you contrast it with Middle Ages, while Middle Ages can be regarded as a hierarchized world, where even the thinking is very hierarchized. As you can see on the slide, cosmos itself was visualized as a vast hierarchy from God to small groups. So everything is hierarchized. There is a place for angels. Angels is something that cannot be touched by rulers. Rulers are someone who cannot be touched by nobility. Nobility is something that cannot be touched by peasantry. So everything has its place in a particular hierarchy, and that is what constituted the outlook of the Middle Ages. So everything has a fixed place. And as the famous saying went at that point of time, the toad could never become a lion and the peasant could never become a lord, right? And that tells you about how predetermined social ordering was, how fixed the duties were so far as different states are concerned or different social groups are concerned. And that mobility, that interpenetration, that dynamism across classes is something that was virtually missing. Whereas the sheer rise of capitalism in 16th century ensured that there is greater social mobility. So you have a new class of the traders, bourgeoisie, or merchant houses or money lenders, etc. And they are the ones who are galvanizing the economy of the time, and that is leading to some kind of a stress on very fixed social ordering of people, because money is getting generated here, and the social class of the trader notwithstanding, now they have capital, and capital earns more profit, and that is the maximum of capitalism, right? So it engendered social mobility, rise of capitalism, that is simultaneously happening. We are talking of the backdrop, we are talking of the background of the emergence of the absolutist monarchies. We will come to the detailing of absolutist monarchies in a subsequent lecture, but this one is essentially about the backdrop. Similarly, centralization of political authority is something that attacked the idea of hierarchy. This is something that is a little bit contentious, because absolutist monarchs at times relied a lot, and at times it was a kind of pact of convenience with the existing nobility, particularly in eastern half of Europe. But in western half you will find that somehow the idea of hierarchy is under stress on account of centralization of political authority. Rise of capitalism also, capitalism itself engenders accumulation of capital in one hand, and we shall talk about it. Similarly, Protestantism, as I said, is a distinct feature of 16th century European history, and it is essentially about denying the role of intermediaries between God and man, right? And so that segment is done away with, or is under tremendous stress, and that is on account of popularity of Protestantism across a greater part of Europe. Some countries did continue to adhere to Catholicism, but a majority of the countries underwent this Protestant transformation through the efforts of Calvin, Martin Luther, Zwingli, and so forth, and regional variations we'll talk about later. Therefore, the reflection of it could be seen in the literature of the period as well. Shakespearean's craving for earthly division of degree and place. This is like people being socialized to, attuned to a particular way of thinking, that okay, everything is in order, everything has a place, and that should not change. So that kind of yearning, that kind of craving could be seen even in the writings of someone as fine a writer like Shakespeare. Similarly, nobility also repeatedly went on to find solace in the stories of romance and chivalry. Now, they are all born of some kind of a longing for, very fixed, hierarchized social situation, which was so symptomatic of feudal times. Now, that is coming under stress, and therefore you have some kind of an accentuation of desire for these things, accentuation for continuance for this thing, because they are searching for some kind of an order, and they don't understand that the new dynamism is going to churn out a new social order altogether. And absolutism became not only a reflection of it, but it also became an instrument of this change. Now, historians debate over it, to what extent the absolutist states were very conservative, and they just ensured their political perpetuation, or to what extent they became the engine of change, an agency of change, an agency of social and economic change. So that we shall discuss when we talk about the country's history in particular, like France, French absolutism, English absolutism, German absolutism, Russian absolutism, and so forth. Similarly, several exhortations by the nobility to the lower order to behave in a particular way, etc., are also going in vain, and they are all symptomatic of the same longing for an ordered social situation that is so characteristic of the feudal times. As you can see further, absolutist monarchies advocated social hierarchies, and yet opened the door to the dynamism of individual men. And this is precisely what I was telling you, that several historians regard that absolutist monarchies didn't always militate against the idea of social hierarchies. Nevertheless, you find some new openings being made for individualism and individual dynamism. As I discussed earlier, modern capitalism also is a story about concentration of economic power, and that changed the existing economic and social order also. Protestantism also was about weakening of restraint on money lending. As you can see on your slide, John Calvin had said money may be allowed to reproduce itself like other goods of man's labor and so forth. All these things went on to lend a lot of support, intellectual and religious support, to the upcoming money lending class or the trading class. Similarly, misuse of economic power for personal gain and luxury by evictions that went alongside enclosure movement or putting out system or dismissing of retainers to increase profit. All these things were not quite denigrated the way it should have been in the earlier religious scenario because of Protestantism, because Protestantism was somewhat soft on this, and it did not attribute all these instances to moral to anything beyond moral failing of an individual, and there was nothing systemic about it. So Christian morality seemed to adjust and not to oppose the new economic facts. It did not decry, it did not denigrate these instances of personal gain and luxury and eviction of peasants through enclosure movement as a work of Satan, but on account of some moral failing of an individual and so forth. So that is it about the intellectual backdrop, the religious backdrop in which absolutist monarchies emerged in different parts of Europe, Western Europe, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe. When we meet next, we shall talk about these experiences of distinct countries in these parts of Europe separately. For now, thank you.